Well, there were some big disasters in 2011 in different parts of the world. There was, of course, huge floods in Pakistan. That was one of the largest disasters in 2011. There was an enormous earthquake in Japan. There was significant flooding in Southeast Asia. And there were quite severe droughts in both the Sahel in Northern Africa and East Africa, in the Horn of Africa as well. It was a complex interplay of factors. So the immediate factors were failed rains in late 2010 and mid-2011. But along with that, conflict was obviously a major factor. The ongoing civil war in Somalia really explains why southern Somalia was the only location in the Horn to declare outright famine. In other parts of Somalia, Ethiopia, Kenya, there was certainly widespread food insecurity, but not outright famine, because governments there and aid agencies were better able to cope with these problems. But underlying the kind of short-term shock, the drought, there were also several adverse stresses on these populations. One would be rapid population growth, declining land resources. Climate change could be another factor, although it's not yet widely established. And also there have been various restrictions on mobility, which is one of the main coping mechanisms that pastoralists use to deal with drought. This is related to land governance issues, cross-border restrictions, and other factors. And so that's really limited pastoralists' ability to cope with these weather shocks. Well, I definitely think there are some severe challenges in this region. There's a kind of a vicious circle here involving weather shocks, possibly climate change, conflict, rapid population growth, and also the breakdown of some traditional institutions and fairly limited investment in the past in these regions. So those are some of the challenges, and they're quite severe. And in the future, some of these may get worse, such as climate change. On the opportunities, I guess the history of underinvestment means that the glass half empty is also half full. There's many high return investments, I think, in these regions. For example, it's a very young population, so there are very high returns to education. Currently, literacy rates in pastoralist areas are well behind other regions in the same country. So there's a lot of underinvestment in education, similarly for health, infrastructure, and so on. So those kind of investments will be very useful in promoting economic diversification, which should enhance resilience in these regions. So while we need some economic diversification in these regions, I think a reality is that pastoralism is going to be one of the dominant sectors for many years to come. At the moment, 60 to 70% of these populations are engaged in pastoralism. And while people think of pastoralism as a fairly kind of traditional subsistence type livelihood, in fact many pastoralists are quite engaged with markets, and it's quite profitable for much of the population. I think what's also been shown in the past, though, is that commercialization of pastoralism hasn't necessarily benefited the poor. So we need to figure out how to make interventions in the pastoralist sector more pro-poor.